Oh, the light, it burns!
Come here, bitch. It's about time you learned your family history. And buckle up, this one's confusing.
You know, that doesn't sound as bad as trying to review games without a console to play them on!
Don't worry, man. I got a good one lined up today that you can play after this story. So, here's the spell, alright? There were these two cavemen, and they made love, and then they had babies, and then that baby laid eggs, and it kept laying eggs, and it hatched, and then a giant kitten came out, and then created the modern man.
Resident Evil. Probably the best and most cohesive, drawn-out story ever written, right? Wrong. The series has always been a hot mess as far as the story goes. Where do you even start if you're trying to play all the games to get the story in order? Probably the first one, right? Wrong, you dummy. You start with 0, of course, and then you play number 1. Then number 2, right? Wrong again, you imbecile. How could you be so uncultured? Next is the first half of number 3, and then number 2, and then the second half of number 3. This isn't rocket science. With so many spin-offs out there, trying to connect the story hurts my brain. The story isn't really great anyway. That being said, I really enjoyed most Resident Evil games I have played, and to be honest, I don't play Resident Evil for the story, but I play for the gameplay and the puzzles. I started with Resident Evil 4 on my Wii back in the day and really enjoyed it, and that's the game that got me hooked on the series. I haven't really gone back to play the old ones as of yet because fixed camera angles scare me. Maybe one day I'll overcome this fear. I know the story of Resident Evil 4 and thought to myself, I've never played any of the spin-off titles, why not try the one that takes place after 4? Why start with the first canonical game in the series when I can jump right to 11 and still be just as lost as people who played all of them? Resident Evil Revelations was first made for the Nintendo 3DS in 2012 by Capcom, which later had an HD version ported to Windows, PS3, Wii U, 360, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. The devs' intentions of this title was to go back to the Resident Evil roots while modernizing the gameplay, and in all honesty, I feel like they did a pretty dang good job. It goes back to its tight rooms, close quarters combat, and all of its typical survival aspects that are in Resident Evil games, and it does it well. Most longtime fans should really play this title for just that reason alone. At the beginning of the game, you take control of Jill Valentine, as she is looking for her partner Chris Redfield on an abandoned ship called the Queen Zenobia. She has a new partner that she spends most of the game with named Parker. Parker is best boy. The gunplay is pretty straightforward like most Resident Evil titles. You get a variety of weapons to help you kill all the mutated monsters you run into throughout your Seaborn adventure. Of course, you have to pay attention to your ammo and health, making sure that you have enough for fights or know when you need to avoid fights. In Revelations, there is no health bar, just a visual cue letting you know if you need health. You can put weapon upgrades you find throughout your journey on your guns, which promotes exploration and of course makes your weapons stronger for fights. You don't really have to inventory manage as much like in previous games as far as storing your guns, ammo, health, and grenades goes. Instead, when you find a gun, it goes back to the gun cases, which are scattered throughout the game. I quite enjoyed this aspect because it allows you to try out every weapon without any penalty to the player. You can take off your upgrades whenever you are at weapon cases, so you never feel like you are losing a gun you have upgraded just to try out a new one. Of course, it doesn't really make sense finding a gun when exploring and tossing down your old one to have it magically appear in your weapons case. But hey, I don't really care because it's a video game. You can only hold 3 weapons at a time, but like I said, there is no penalty for trying out all the weapons, so try away. An awesome thing that they added to this one, and I'm not sure if this is the first game they added it in or not, but they added the ability to walk and aim. In previous games, you couldn't walk and shoot or reload at the same time. It was always stationary. But in this one, you can move and shoot, which I thought was a nice touch and honestly should be a staple in Resident Evil combat from here on out. Another game mechanic that is used quite a lot in this one that I didn't like was the scanner tool you are given. You are to use the scanner tool to find hidden items in rooms, which usually consists of ammo, guns, upgrades, or grenades. Just let me see the items when I walk into a room. Why do I need to scan everything? Plus, most of the time I would forget about my scanner or just neglect it because it was a nuisance. You can also scan enemies, which once you hit 100% you are granted another herb for use, but you can only hold 5 at a time, and the game does a pretty good job of giving you herbs throughout it, especially if you explore. There's also a dodge mechanic, which you usually just have to press the W key and your character would move out of the way, but it never seemed to work like that for me. Maybe I just suck at dodging. You also get a knife in this one, and what I thought was cool is that every character you play as has a different melee weapon, from double swords to a big axe. You have a map that is always on display to assist you with navigating the ship and is very helpful pretty much at all times. That being said, the actual map menu was super hard for me to navigate and plan out routes. Partly because it doesn't show you which way your character is pointing, it's just a dot. Most of the game takes place on the Queen Zenobia ship, save a few levels where you play flashbacks or as other characters that don't last very long. I personally prefer different locales, but fans of the original will appreciate the level design. That being said, I think it is pretty cool that they are able to fit lots of different rooms and areas into one map, but I still prefer change. Most combat situations are close quarters, which isn't bad by any means, but gave me no reason to use my sniper. I tried using it when I first picked up the sniper, but I'm a terrible shot in most games, and it didn't help that the enemies were always right up in my face. I definitely preferred the shotgun or SMG for most fights. I did enjoy exploring the ship and finding items, upgrades, and solving all the puzzles scattered throughout. Obviously, in most survival games, exploring is an important part, especially if you want to not run out of ammo or health. This Resident Evil game is no different. Plus, the more you progress through the game, you get keys that allow you to visit previously locked areas that you don't necessarily need to go to progress the story. Speaking of story, it is broken up into an episodic fashion, which I haven't really experienced in a Resident Evil game up to this point. It was kinda nice in the sense that they always have recaps after each episode that tries to help you understand the story and keep up with what just previously happened. That being said, I was still lost. The characters are all quite enjoyable and the voice acting was on par.
There. A little friendly partner swapping should keep us on our toes.
Roger that. We'll take care of the virus. You two buy us some time.
Got it.
Parker is still my favorite. There are lots of different enemy types for you to run into, and it shakes up your strategy to figure out what is the best way to dispose of them. Some enemies have shields, while others swim underwater and scare the hell out of you. You also got these sniper bastards that are annoying. All of the boss fights were pretty enjoyable too. They all have different designs and ways to go about injuring and killing them. Going back to the story, it takes place between 4 and 5, starring Jill and Chris. Of course, the Resident Evil storyline is really messed up. We already discussed this, and in this title, it isn't terrible, but it wasn't a riveting story either. Spoiler warning for the Resident Evil Revelations story. If you want to not get spoiled, skip to the timestamp ahead. Otherwise, keep watching. There isn't really a main villain boss fight to build up to. Lansdale is the main villain, I suppose, but you don't ever fight him. In a nutshell, there are 3 groups: the FBC, the BSAA, and Veltro, which is the terrorist group that used bioterrorism to manhandle the floating city named Terra Grigia. Turns out Lansdale was using Veltro to show the world bioterrorism is still around and give the FBC more money and power. He eventually destroys the city. O'Brien, the guy in charge of the BSAA, later revives Veltro after a year to put pressure on Lansdale, but he doesn't tell any of his agents from the BSAA like Jill or Chris. The story can be summed up with just so much backstabbing. Everyone lies and backstabs each other, with some people being double agents and even triple agents trying to do who the hell knows what. God, I'm lost. Also, even though I like characters in games or shows, I very much dislike it when an emotional death happens and then the game or movie is like, oh yeah, you cried for the last 10 minutes? Well, you're just a bitch because the character didn't actually die, they are still alive. No, you're the bitch! If you're gonna kill off a character, stick to your guns and do it! Finally, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the raid mode. It's kind of like Mercenaries mode in other titles, but a little bit different. Your goal is to get through levels as fast as you can while trying to kill everything. You can select different characters and level them up as well as purchase new guns and upgrades. It was an okay mode, but it wasn't my favorite. Aside from the very Resident Evil-like story, I really did enjoy playing through Revelations. The gameplay is great and very reminiscent of Resident Evil 4 and 5, combined with the original's tight quarters combat and horror elements. The puzzles were fun and simple for the most part, and exploring is always a pleasure in most Resident Evil titles. Managing your ammo and health is a big part of Revelations, especially on harder difficulties. It is a linear game, but allows you to go visit different areas as you progress and find keys. It may all take place on the ship, but trust me, there is a lot to discover on this infested floating bucket. Overall, Revelations is a fun game, and I recommend it to Resident Evil fans. I definitely feel like this is a very underrated Resident Evil title, and honestly ticks a lot of boxes for more casual and hardcore fans alike. It really is the best of both worlds and finds a good, healthy balance of the originals while trying to modernize the combat. If you are a Resident Evil fan, you need to make sure Resident Evil Revelations is on your playlist.
And then when the midichlorians all line together, that's how me and your mother met.
What?
Yeah, I know, confusing, right?
No, I know my dad. I could call him.
No! I am your father. Well, anyways, I'm gonna go get drunk and hit on some college girls. Hey, wait. Go back in your closet And don't touch Daddy's gun. Alright, I'm off. See you later. Wait. Okay, remember this. My key is in the bottom drawer of my dresser. Remember that? Remember that? Okay. See you later, champ.